make it tonight, right? First one of the year is always a little shot in the dark. But Helicon West is a live reading series that brings published local writers to read alongside community members in an open, uncensored forum. In order to promote the voice of every community member and democratic ideals, we honor all levels of skill, ability, and craft. In addition to featuring published authors to give the literary arts more exposure in Cache Valley and its surrounding areas, we invite and celebrate aspiring writers from every walk of life to find and share their voices with us. We are committed to the causes of inclusion, accessibility, and representation in our writing communities. I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Bear River Heritage Area, the Logan Library, Sugar House Review, the Utah Humanities, and our founder and matron saint, Star Colebrook. If you would like to read during the open mic portion of the event, which is the entire event tonight, you can find our sign-up sheet right behind Nathan, the camera guy there. For those on Zoom, they will raise their virtual hands, and I guess I'll tell them that later. Okay, each reader will have up to 7 minutes of time to read for us, and after 7 minutes, we will politely clap you along. All of our Helicon West events are recorded and then posted to our Helicon West YouTube channel. If you do not wish to be recorded but would like to read during the open mic, please make a note by your name when you sign up, or just kind of like tell us now and we'll press pause. Helicon West is made possible by our generous sponsors in the community. To help us stay in person, there's a couple different ways you can donate. We've got little bookmarks with our QR code now that'll take you right to our PayPal. There's also a little tip jar there. And when we bring in readers with books, we hope you support them by buying copies from them as well. Okay, so for tonight, we have an all-open mic program for us. I know for a fact that we've got one name down so far. Oh, we've got 3. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we will start with Ronald Jensen, Tim Keller, and Jay Payne. And if anyone else walked in and wants to sign up, you are more than welcome.
Hi.
Hey, Ron.
COVID-19, however blue, it will have to be quarantined and God will ever see you. Anywhere apart, I'm sharing with you. After being hospitalized, I'm glad to be back with you. Couldn't ask for anything more. But here you are, and I still adore. From Maxine, where would we be without you getting our plans together before the wedding? Something I always appreciate. You're getting them on the first date. The start of the ball rolling, for fun to begin. So I'm glad to have you as one of my team. From 2022. 2 years of my lifetime, that was a few. 1999, 2000, now 2022. This one has a visit. Got to first 3 times. So 902. That is so fine. Wishing you a great 2023. May you have success in all you do. Thank you.
Got too many attachments. This is an essay called Creature. Creature from Black Lake, 1975, ranks to this day among the scariest movies I've ever seen. Perhaps it has something to do with the way and where I grew up. The Wasatch Mountains in northern Utah boast all manner of remote wilderness, lakes, rivers, and tall tales of the creatures within. Creatures like Sasquatch, Manitou, even the Bear Lake Monster factored heavily into the campfire tales of my youth. Having recently acquired Netflix, I undertook the viewing of some of my formative favorites through the lens of adulthood. I placed my request and was informed that while obscure, the title existed in another region, though it would take some time to arrive. I worried as I waited, would it measure up, or would it, like so many other childhood obsessions, turn out to be an incredible cheese fest? When at last the telltale Netflix red envelope arrived, it was all I could do to get through the workday. On my way home, I bought some suitably trashy movie snacks and turned off the lights and began. The film is campy, no doubt. The setting is a slice of small-town Americana, and the characters are mostly likable country folk, kind of a Monster Meets Mayberry sort of thing. It was easy to chuckle at my childhood self at first, but the film also plays expertly on our fears at a primal level. The creatures roar, the darkness, even the daylight scenes take place in closed cover, and we don't get a clear view of the creature until the last scenes of the film. Even my father, Mom wisely refused to see it. A formidable man and war veteran besides, had jumped several times. The film opens with a couple of Deliverance-looking woodsmen rowing their canoe into the backcountry to do some hunting. Unlike Deliverance, however, the men are friendly, kind, and the depth of their romance is obvious. The boat slams to a halt. Thinking they're hung up on something, the bowman reaches under the boat to free them. That's when a giant hairy arm explodes from the surface, flings him out of the boat and under the water, where an intense, albeit useless struggle man disappears. Only pieces of him are ever found. Traumatic stuff for a 9-year-old. That scene, however, is nothing compared to the one in which the unfortunate trapper's compatriot relates his tale to the police. 8 feet tall, he says. 300 pounds, he says. I remember 300 pounds. I passed that particular milestone sometime last year. Apparently, by 1975 standards, at least I now overmatch my childhood's greatest fear. It wasn't always like this. On the day of my high school graduation, I stood 6 feet tall and weighed a svelte 152 pounds, but hey, I'm the victim of evolution. Or rather, the glacial pace thereof. Ancestors on my father's side were Vikings who, according to at least one Discovery Channel documentary, pillaged my mother's Anglo-Saxon ancestors for generations. The results of which are obvious. My body clearly evolved from maximum mayhem to battle bears, pillage villages, and all on a Snicker-sized piece of whale blubber. That strike one. Strike two is being raised Mormon. Don't get me wrong, Mormons are perfectly nice people. But food is a huge part of Mormon culture. Even the once-a-month fast lasts only a single meal and generally serves only to whet the appetite in preparation for an afternoon of unbridled gluttony. Based upon those factors alone, one can conclude that a slender adulthood was never going to happen. Alas, I also love food. Hostess ding-dongs in particular, and pizza and Big Macs and burritos and everything in between. And not just food, I love the experience of food. From fine dining to road trip food mart forays to settling down for an evening of late-night television, a heavy-laden tray full of forbidden fruit or Fruit Loops before me. Sunday dinner, funeral potatoes, roast, whatever, and why not? Life is too short for subsisting on tofu and wheat salad. Besides, I've been known to rationalize, I'm not fat, just heavily built, big-boned, husky even, and heck, I can always go on a diet. Still, every so often, one of these warning signs pop up, little things like outweighing Bigfoot, or the time 3 heroically proportioned friends and I lifted the table off the floor by squeezing into a restaurant booth. Or the time on the Desperado roller coaster, 4 G's of acceleration blew every seam out of my Levi's. That was humiliating. What choice did I have but to ride it 5 more times? Amusement parks can be excellent barometers of one's personal growth. Take, for instance, a trip to the Lagoon Amusement Park in Farmington, Utah, so epic in its scope that my friend wrote about it in his column. Alex and Shelby, who each run around 130 pounds soaking wet, plus Courtney and myself, who can best be described as full-figured, were in line for the wild mouse. When at last we reached the front of the line, Alex jumped in with Shelby, leaving the rear seat for us. At which time the somewhat flummoxed ride attendant asked, "Would you gentlemen prefer separate cars?" To be honest, we thought the question odd, rude even. I mean, why would we want to ride separately? A quick glance confirmed that Shelby and Alex were already strapped in, so we ignored the attendant's query and jumped into the car, at which point Courtney's left butt cheek and my right came to a painful halt about halfway in. leaving several inches of open spaces between our gluteus maximi and the seat. A situation made worse by the ride attendant's performance of the Heimlich maneuver with the restraint bar. We couldn't even fasten the seatbelt around us both, and the car had already begun to move, so before we concluded that this might already be a horrible, terrible, no good, very bad idea, in desperation, we each wrapped an end around our wrists. Grab me if I start to fly out, Courtney joked. We shall never speak of this, I responded. As other than my relation here and his in his column, we have not. As our car began its agonizingly slow climb to the top, we became almost preternaturally aware of the creaks and groans of metal being stretched. Near breaking point, our faces pointed heavenward during the ascent, and all I could think about was showing up at the pearly gates, whereupon we would be forced to admit to being ejected from the wild mouse. On the third turn from the top, plummeting 100 feet to the ground and crushing the churro kiosk. In descent, the car became a blinding, speeding blubberknot of death. Careening along the track at supernatural velocity, we shrieked until only dogs and bats could hear us. Fortunately, we were wedged so tight that no real movement was possible. We lived to tell the tale, swearing never to ride together again, a pact I must admit to have broken on more than one occasion. Actually, I've kind of gotten used to things like being a mobile amusement park attraction. One day, while relaxing at a local water park, a diminutive shadow fell upon me. "Mister," a lad of undetermined age asked, "Are you going to ride again, the slide again?" Slowly I turned, fixing this upstart with my chilliest of glances. "I might. Why?" Apparently his interest had to do with physics, what with water displacement being what it is. And so they followed me, and he and his friends, Pied Piper style, to line up along the landing, where they celebrated my splash down at the base of the water slide, yelling, "Blast off!" While life's little reminders taken on the whole prove beyond a doubt that I am in fact not merely heavy-boned or husky or big, I am certain if you can grab a handful of bone and jiggle it like so, you probably have a medical condition and see a doctor right away. Pride forces me to admit at this point to halt this essay of self-deprecation long enough to explain that I am in fact active, more so than most. I do ranch work, yard work, I walk every night, I hunt, I fish, I hike, I swim, and on occasion even take the stairs. I've tried the diets, but even the advice of much vaunted Dr. Atkins failed in the face of Mother Nature. A steak without potatoes, after all, is really just a slab of dead cow. Growing older, not to mention larger, is not for sissies. Like so many things, I've made my peace with the passage of time. Would I rather be thin again? Of course, and maybe someday my plane will crash in the Andes and it will happen. I can see it now, after months of unparalleled suffering of watching my fitter traveling companions succumb. Until at long last, too demoralized to go on, I stripped to my tattered skivvies, stretched forth my limbs, and leaped from a precipice only to discover my ability to go out glide, squirrel-like, to the safety of the water below. Barring that, just thinking about it all, it's exhausting. Would someone please pass the ding dongs?
Oh my God.
Alright, I just have one poem tonight. It's titled Beginner's Advice on Shooting Stars. I'll be honest, I'm never certain whether I'll witness one of these brief blips burning fantastic, but there's always a chance, and I have been fortunate, like the time my friend and I stargazed from dusk to dawn, assuming an increase in time coincided with an increase in odds, when really we should have consulted a meteor shower guide or Googled best places to stargaze. But we go where we can, when we can. And that night we found ourselves on a boulder above a lake nestled somewhere inside the mountains, all part of a trip I had planned between her gas station shifts and my summer cosmology class. I saw a shooting star that night. She was preoccupied with some story when I shook her shoulder. Look, look, as the silver streak smeared across the twilight-filled firmament, vanished into pointlessness. She missed it, looking up only to see a darkening sky, real stars emerging, the brighter bodies drilled in like shiny screws. We were still waiting when morning red rinsed away the night. No more shooting stars had surfaced, but it's never about how many you see. You just go where you can, when you can, and sometimes comets will appear. Most times they won't. but they will always give you reason to return because you'll secretly love wanting that chance to focus on something fleeting, I'm certain.
Thank you. Oh, okay, we're pretty close to getting our Zoom audience back.
Yeah, we know.
Painfully aware, so thank you. Hello, can you hear us? Yes! Hooray! Oh, did Star leave right as we figured it out? That's so funny. Okay, can we get the sound to come out the TV?
I do not know.
Well, one of you two just start saying the alphabet for us so we can sound test the TV here.
No, apparently not.
That's, I mean, that was pretty far actually, so.
I can fix this. Keep chatting for a second. Yeah, I'm just gonna say, are you gonna continue?
This is our first time with Zoom in this location, so. Our first roadblock was finding the Wi-Fi password. And the second one, the TV wanted to, or the computer wanted to update, but.
Should have been there. Is nothing coming out of there?
Mm-mm.
No? Why is it? Why are you doing this to us?
Do you want me to put the cord in a different plug?
No, that won't do anything.
Okay. All right, well, while Nathan does his best to make this work, I will read a few poems for you all. I should probably step back for the camera. So these poems, last year was a tricky year, right? I wrote like 9 poems total, and I was really surprised when 4 of them got picked up to be published by the same magazine, because for me, and like that's a really good number in a year, right? Like, for me anyway, at the rate that I submit and produce writing. So I will share 2 of those with you all tonight. So this first one is titled, My Mother's Mind. And it's a poem where like the title just bleeds into the rest, so I'll just read it as a stream. My mother's mind is kept blank as unlined paper, hospital linoleum pure and bright, complete with thick antiseptic smell. Fluorescent blindness rules, and thoughts must remove their shoes, shed all implications at the door to avoid upsetting the peace with a squeak. At the thinnest hint of dirt or doubt, the shadow comes out. Pure density of horror drags the thought by the neck or swallows it whole before retreating into corners she's too medicated to see. Something like elevator music plays. No words, only strings. And the second poem for tonight is called Gatekeeper. Near enough to help my grandma die, I play daughter, driver, neighbor, friend. I clutch her whittled arm against my peachy ribs as we cross icy patches in the sidewalk, her cane popping along. I buffer her stumbles with our flesh and blood, smell the fat that boils over and burns on her stove, keep her happy full of insulin and Diet Coke. My faith dissolves with her dementia, memories pink folds chewing and chewing away as my grandmother bobs like a specter through the night in her blue bathrobe and mismatched shoes. I walk her to the gates, daughter that I am. I've been to them before, at 18, the day my rapist last touched me. All I had to do was send him through that infinite minute his back was turned. I saw the fire poker and I knew how, the heavy promise of a pointed iron key. My kidneys fat as tomatoes about to seed, screaming deep inside me. He looked so human, so penetrable, so flesh, prone as the small purse of my grandmother, slumped unconscious in her wide red rocker. Here as always. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate your heart. Okay. Did either of you two want to read something for us? We could crank the volume up as loud
I
as...
think I got it.
You think you got it?
I don't
Really?
know. Let's hear someone. Someone on
This is a test of speech. Can you hear us?
totally
Yes,
can.
we can.
Okay. Well, it's so nice seeing hear all of you, but anticlimactically, I don't have anything to read. I just wanted to help with the volume check.
Yay!
We love you too, Teresa. Thank you. What about you, Sean? Anything in the piggy bank?
I don't currently have anything in the piggy bank, no.
Okay, me neither. It's fine. Okay. Does anyone else that joined us tonight want to share with us? It's a very low pressure, small audience tonight. Anyone want to double dip?
I can share. Can't promise it's 7 minutes though.
Nope,
That's
that's
all right.
okay. Definitely doesn't have to be. And what's your name?
Tyler.
Tyler. Perfect. Thank you. Come on up.
As kind of a disclaimer, I am a very amateur writer and I'm writing a fantasy book.
Yay.
So I'm going to read you guys the first chapter. I've kind of gone through it and I've reviewed it a couple times and had a couple people give comments on it. So I'm going to just read through the first chapter with you guys. The book is called In a World of Dreams. Chapter 1. Max was startled awake by a thunderous explosion. As his eyes shot open, he was momentarily blinded by the brilliant white light high in the night sky. He hurriedly pulled the curtain closed just before the next set of explosions sounded overhead. Heart pounding, he turned around to find a face with wide eyes and a mischievous smile just inches away from his. Max jumped and punched the figure in the stomach, causing the person to collapse, gasping for breath. Max blinked as his eyes adjusted to the dim light. He was at the far end of his mom's workshop. Boxes and metal and spring were left haphazardly around the room, leaving the large shelves on the right wall mostly empty. Small woven baskets lined with the tops of the shelves, letting out small streams of light through tiny holes from the moonstones and sunstones hidden within. Against the left wall sat a large work table covered with tools, scraps, and half-finished projects. On the ground in front of him lay a familiar figure, rubbing his stomach. "Jonah!" Max exclaimed, recognizing the scrawny figure of his best friend. Max held out his hand to lift him up. "What were you thinking? I could have killed you." Jonah barked out a laugh. "Killed me? That punch was so weak I fell down from laughing." He grabbed Max's hand and pulled himself to his feet, earning himself a flat stare from Max. Tall, sunburnt, and lanky Jonah had been Max's best friend ever since he could remember. They had been born only a couple weeks apart. Jonah's father had fled the city before he had been born, and so Max's mom would watch Jonah while his mother worked, at least until Max and his family moved from the northern ridge. Since then, the only time that Max and Jonah could find together was on their expeditions at night. "I thought we agreed that tonight we'd get some sleep for the first day at the academy tomorrow," sighed Max. "We don't want to fall asleep on our first day." "Of course not," Jonah said excitedly. "I wouldn't have come unless I found a place that's special." "The last time you said that about ended up being the sewers," grumbled Max. "I promise I did the smell test this time. Besides, it's my turn to take the first step." Grumbling a bit more, Max finally relented. "Okay, fine, I'll go with you, but we have to be quick. Wait for me out back." This got a series of whoops and air punches from Jonah as Max hurriedly made his way to get changed. Another set of explosions went off just as Max got to the back door. He waited for the explosions to stop before heading outside. Jonah was sitting in a corner near the steps leading up to the back door. He was inspecting one of the moonstones that Max's mother had badly chipped a few days back. Even though it was practically useless for an inanimate, the small deformed stone glowed with a faint blue light. "You can ask my mom if you can have it when we get back, with how long this will take," Max teased. Eyes opening wide, and clasping a hand to his chest, Jonah gasped with feigned shock. "You don't trust me when I say it'll be quick?" Max scoffed. "That doesn't even deserve an answer." Max walked to the alleyway behind his house and peeked around the corner to get a good view of the street. "Have you seen any patrols yet?" "Only 10 or 11, with how long it took you to change," Jonah teased. He then got serious as he joined Max at the edge of the alley, pulling out a sand timer, just smaller than the size of his fist. "I haven't seen a patrol come through here yet, so we will probably see one within the next few minutes, if we don't head out soon." Max and Jonah had lots of experience avoiding the patrols after 5 years of practice. The citywide curfew had only been problematic for a month or two before they learned the routes of the patrols. Before it would take them an hour to go a couple blocks. Now they could make their way halfway across the city in the same amount of time. The only problem is you never know when the explosions hit the barrier overhead, lighting up the entire city. The city has been attacked nightly by the resistance, a group of rebels, for the past 5 decades. Well, 53 years to be exact. It takes most of the dreamers in the city to be able to hold the barrier up all night. Occasionally, there is a slip-up, and some of the missiles manage to make their way into the city, destroying anything that hit. Mostly it's parts of houses or stores, but there are stories of people being hit while walking around outside past curfew. A basement or cellar is a mandatory part of every property for protection. It also serves the dual purpose of helping block out some of the noise to make it possible to get some rest. Max stifled a yawn. "Where is this extra special place, anyway?" He walked back to the door and sat on the stairs under the eaves to wait. "It's..." Jonah hesitated, then mumbled a couple of unintelligible words. Max cocked his head to the side, looking at his friend. "I thought your mom taught you not to speak with your mouth full," Max said with mock seriousness. Jonah let out a big sigh. "It's in the northern section of the lower ring." "The lower ring?" Max exclaimed, earning a couple of quick shushes from Jonah. "The lower ring?" Max repeated more quietly, but with the same intensity. "We can't go that far tonight. Let me remind you that we are starting at the academy tomorrow." I know, Jonah said quickly, holding out his hands to stop the outburst. "This place is worth it. It's better than any place we've ever been to before." Max raised an eyebrow. "The last time you said that, we ended up stuck in that one merchant's vault for half a day. This place is different. It's like nothing we've explored before," Jonah pleaded, his eyes wide. mouth scrunched up in a laughable attempt at an innocent face. Max rolled his eyes and let out a sigh. You're lucky that I'm already changed. Jonah let out a quiet whoop, and then went silently as they heard footsteps. And then went silent as they heard footsteps of a patrol walk by the entrance of the alley. They waited in the alley until the next series of explosions sounded overhead, before turning over the sand timer and quietly taking off down the street toward the northern side of the inner wall. After about 15 minutes of scurrying down the street and dodging patrols, Jonah held out the drained sand timer. They immediately ducked into a nearby alley. While the attacks are never regular, they never hit sooner than 20 minutes after a previous attack. The one rule of the streets at night is never be out during the explosions. Not because you might get hit, even though there are stories of that happening, but because you might get spotted by patrol when the streets get lit up. After about 10 minutes of waiting, a wave of explosions sounded overhead as the city lit up. The bombardment lasted about 2 minutes before plunging the city back into the dark silence of the night. Jonah flipped the sand timer over, and they headed back into the streets. They repeated this process a few more times before the dark, looming form of the inner wall became visible. A stone's throw from the wall, the line of buildings ended, opening up to the area where the northern marketplace would be during the day. Peeking his head out, Jonah looked back and forth for patrols before scampering across the courtyard for the blank section of wall. Jonah! Max hissed. He looked back and forth, quickly hesitating, and then hurriedly darted after his friend. Max quietly made his way up to the wall as a serious Jonah moved his hand along the blank stones of the inner wall, muttering to himself. What are you doing? Whispered Max, glancing over his shoulder anxiously. There's no cover here. We're screwed if a patrol comes by. Ignoring Max, Jonah tapped a section of the wall, counting out blocks of stone down and to the right. He stopped on one and pushed hard as a door-sized chunk of wall silently swung out towards them. Jonah stepped back with a huge smile as he turned to Max and gave him a low bow, chuckling at the look of awe plastered on Max's face. May I do the honors? He asked, gesturing toward the opening in the wall. You may, Max replied, quickly correcting himself, just as a massive explosion sounded directly overhead, the light blinding him. Max stumbled a couple steps toward the door before a hand grabbed his arm, yanking him into the wall as the door closed behind them, shutting them into complete darkness and muffling the explosions on the other side. Muttering under his breath, a narrow downward sloped passage lit up as Jonah fished out a small deformed moonstone from her rear. The glow was only bright enough to allow them to see a few feet down the passage. How did you find this? Max asked with amazement. Jonah started down the passage, and Max could almost see his friend glowing as bright as a sunstone with pride. I found it yesterday, Jonah said. I was hiding from Mr. Godfrey. He loaned me a sandwich and reneged on the deal. So you stole it, Max said flatly, causing Jonah to flinch. Jonah shrugged uncomfortably. Same difference. Anyway, he chased me through the market, and I hid behind a couple of stalls next to the wall. I accidentally pressed the stone to open the door as I was trying to slide back out. Do you know how far the passage goes? Max asked, yawning. I have no idea. I didn't actually go inside last time. I was thinking that we could explore it for about 30 minutes before heading back. Max bit his lip, thinking, let's do it. I don't know if I will be able to sleep very well after finding this place. After sloping down the first little bit, it flattened out. The passage was straight without any turn-offs, and it was also very plain. There weren't any pictures or designs on the floor of the walls that they could see. After 30 minutes of walking, Jonah abruptly stopped, causing Max to run into him. Furrowing his brow in annoyance, Max looked up over his friend's shoulder. What's the... Max trailed off, the words dying on his lips. They were stopped in front of a blank wall, a dead end. Jonah's whole body sagged with disappointment. I really thought, Jonah muttered as he stared at the smooth stone wall, as if it had some secret it would share at any moment. I'm sorry, Jonah, Max said, hesitantly putting a hand on his friend's shoulder, unsure of how to comfort him. At least we found a cool hiding place, right? Jonah chuckled sarcastically. Of course. We found a really long and really narrow room. Now I know just where to go when I want to feel claustrophobic. At least we still have time to get some sleep tonight, Max said awkwardly, glancing down at the ever-brightening moonstone. Jonah let out a dejected sigh. You're right, he admitted, shaking his head. Damn wall, he cursed, giving the wall a solid kick, causing the wall to swing slightly out on invisible silent hinges, briefly letting a cool breeze into the passage. They both froze, staring at what they now realized was an intricately made wall. They glanced at each other and in unison pushed the concealed door open. They stepped out and gaped at the sight before them. A nearly full moon shone overhead, lighting up rolling hills covered with tall grass and flowers, rippling in the breeze. At the far end of the plain, a long, ominous tree line extended in both directions. Many of the flowers glowed a brilliant white, as if they were soaking up the light of the moon itself. But even the flowers were dull compared to the beautiful backdrop that was the night sky. High overhead, the moon seemed to be surrounded by thousands of twinkling moonstones of different colors. In a couple of parts of the night sky, there almost seemed to be a white sheen that sat behind the twinkling lights. It looks like the sky from the stories from before the great conquest, Jonah said, his body slack with awe. It seemed like he was trying to look everywhere at once as they walked to a spot to lay down in the sea of grass. I thought the war had blacked out all the lights in the night sky but the moon. Maybe the sky is starting to go back to what it was like 300 years ago, Max said aloud, thinking loud. Or maybe the shield blocks all but the strongest light. The moon does look brighter here than in the city. Jonah sat up, looking around, drinking in their surroundings. So this is what an observer gets to see every day, Jonah said, with a satisfied smile. I've never been so motivated to go to school in my life. You're so lucky that you already know your calling, Max sighed. Jonah looked over. You still don't know what to do yet? Weren't you talking to that big, dirty guy with the hammer and anvil? Max raised an eyebrow, smiling. The blacksmith? Don't you clean his place every Monday? That doesn't mean I'm supposed to remember what his job is called. And don't change the topic. Max let out a heavy sigh. It just doesn't feel right. How is it supposed to feel? I don't know, but not like that. My head would explode pounding on metal every day. Jonah gave him a long look before laying down, letting the matter drop. That was one of Jonah's gifts. He never pushed you for information. He let everything come out in its own time. After a few minutes, Max sat up, looking back at the city. Isn't it weird that we haven't heard or seen any attacks on the city since we entered the tunnel? I wouldn't worry about it, Jonah said, staring up at the brilliant night sky. They probably just saw your face and ran off in horror. Max gave him a sharp glare, earning a chuckle out of Jonah. Jonah's eyes darted to the tree line with excitement. Do you think they were watching us? Max's stomach did an uneasy flip. I doubt it, Max replied, his heart rate starting to race as he scanned the trees. We should probably get back to the city, though. If they decide to attack again, I don't want to be the idiot that showed the rebels a secret passage leading past the inner walls. Max slowly stood up, started walking back to the wall. Since you asked so nicely, we can go, Jonah said with mock politeness, standing up to follow. Max's heart stopped. The door was gone. Where did he come out of the wall? Max asked anxiously, running his hand along the weathered stone wall. Jonah walked up next to Max. His eyes narrowed, scanning the wall. He reached out and pushed on one of the stones that made up the wall. Nothing happened. Well, it's not right there, Jonah said, stepping back. You don't say, Max said. Jonah hesitated for a second, and then started pushing stones at random. We really are idiots, Max said, shaking his head, chuckling. He gestured to the right. I'll start from down here and we'll meet in the middle. Don't skip any stones. Jonah grunted a reply, and as Max walked down a little ways, and Max walked down a little ways down the wall. After a few minutes, Max felt a stone give way as a chunk of wall swung outward. Max called out softly to Jonah, who quickly came scampering over. Picking up a small rock, Jonah carved a small cross on the stone that opened the door. I'll do the same to the entrance, so you can find the door too, Jonah said, pocketing the rock. Now let's get back. I want to try this sleep thing you keep talking about. Partway down the passage, they heard the muffled echo of the distant explosions over the city again. They glanced at each other, both chuckling uneasily, realizing how close they were to being caught outside the city during the attack. When they reached the end of the passage, they both pulled out their sand timers. "No sleeping in tomorrow," Max whispered, trying to get as much intensity into his stare as he could. "We can't be late on our first day of school." Jonah gave a low, mocking bow. "As you wish, my lord." Jonah came up with a smile, plastered to his face as the muffled explosion sounded off again over the city. Jonah pocketed his moonstone, plunging the passage into complete darkness as they waited for the bombardment to end. After waiting to make sure that the last explosion had gone off, Max pushed open the door. Jonah quickly marked the stone that opened the wall with a cross before they split up to take their separate paths home. Once Max was back on the familiar streets of the Upper Ring, he looked up at the pitch black sky, remembering the glittering lights from outside the wall. Why couldn't you see those lights inside the city? Who built that tunnel? Does anyone else? Max was suddenly blinded and deafened as a huge explosion went off overhead. He jumped sideways towards a nearby alleyway, scraping an arm and a knee as he rolled to his feet. He felt his way along the wall, behind some boxes, jamming his toe in the process. He covered his ears and put his head between his legs, trying to get as small as possible, not knowing how much cover the boxes provided from the street. When the bombardment stopped, Max slowly took his hands off his ears and started blinking. Gradually, his vision became clear and the ringing in his ears stopped. He was about to stand up when he heard voices approaching the alleyway. "The person was right here. I bet it's someone from the Resistance," said a nasally voice from around the corner. Max curled up as small as he could get behind the boxes, silently cursing himself for not paying attention to his sand timer. Max heard another higher-pitched female voice call out, "Hurry, men, draw your weapons, we're under attack," followed by a round of laughter. The deep voice spoke up. "Quiet down, everybody. There's nobody here, Marsh. I know how much you wanted us to be under attack, but the light from the explosions is just playing tricks on your eyes." Marsh responded persistently. "I know I saw someone, though. They must have taken off down one of these alleyways." "Leave it be, Marsh," the deep voice replied forcefully. The last people to be out on the streets at night were 2 boys years ago, and they were dealt with publicly by the captain himself. I doubt anyone will try sneaking around for another few years." The group chuckled at that. Max unconsciously touched the scars on his back with a shiver. As the voices started to fade, the patrol moving on, allowing Max to let out a sigh of relief. After giving the patrol plenty of time to move on, Max set out into the streets and quickly made his way back home. He quietly got changed and made his way back to his bed in the basement. He was still thinking about the new world they discovered as he drifted off to sleep.
Thank you, Tyler. Is this your first time at Helicon too? Welcome, welcome. Okay, we've run the gamut tonight. We've got poetry, nonfiction, fiction. It was wonderful. I know we're small, but we're tight, right? We got this. Please be sure to join us again next 2 weeks from today, same place. More cohesive Zoomability as well. Cross your fingers. We will be featuring the Indigenous writer Stacey Dennett-Sosi. She is a USU alumna. She's published in bunches of really beautiful places, and she has her first book coming out, I believe, in 2023, a collection of her short stories. So make sure you come back. If you like, there are flyers with copies of our schedule for the spring with all of our upcoming events. Feel free to take one. The bookmarks are also free, as is the coffee by the door. Okay, perfect. Thank you all.